Ose shalom shema uyase shalom aleinu ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום שמרמה הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל ואמרו אמן. May the one who makes peace in the highest bring peace upon us and upon all the earth. May the one who makes peace in the highest bring peace upon us and upon all the earth. Oh, say shalom, shalom, shalom aleinu, ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל ואמרו amen. Now is a time for trust, now is a time for compassion, now is a time for truth, now is a time for faith, now is a time for forgiving. Now is the time for letting go, now is a time for trust, now is a time for compassion, now is a time for truth, now is a time for faith, now is a time for forgiving. Now is a time for letting go, now is a time for trust, now is a time for compassion, now is a time for truth, now is a time for faith, now is a time for forgiving. Now is a time for letting go.
Good morning, everybody. It's very nice to see you. So I confess to having skin in the game on that one, but I wanted to use it to begin with. It's Ose Shalom by Judith Silver, and her the resemblance of her name to mine is not a coincidence. This is my sister. She lives in England. She's a composer and choir director, and she uses music in all sorts of contexts. And I feel that that song is perfect for the material of this session. I shall explain. I'm very grateful that you're here. So let me begin to share my screen. I have a bunch of things to share today. Here we go. So my first proposition is that in this session, and it's particularly important in this session, is that we are in sacred time. That this is a gift that we are giving to ourselves and to each other to dive a little more deeply into the process of what I'm calling here eldering, which is the process of no longer being young, if I can put it that way, with everything that that brings behind it. So just to set a little bit of the context, since I've been at IKAR, I've been convening groups to talk and share and discuss and share wisdom about this process of eldering. There's been one conscious aging group in person, there's been one conscious aging group over Zoom, and it was the wish of both of those groups to take a look together at this book. So that's what this session is for. And it has a dual purpose. One is a subjective purpose, that it gives us the opportunity to turn towards that part of ourself that is becoming older, that society might not encourage us to look at. And the second purpose is for us to be able, as a cohort, to ask ourselves how this work is going to sit for us in the IKAR community. It won't surprise you to hear that we live in a society that on the whole does not do aging or eldering very well. Our wish at IKAR is that we should do it better, and that we should do it together. So for transparency, I am saying that with these initial sessions that I've been running over the past year, part of the purpose is to take a sounding of this generation within the IKAR community. 25% of the IKAR community is over 55 at this time. And what I'm discovering is that eldering work can begin even earlier than that. So I welcome you into a space where we will both receive and share wisdom about this. This is a very, very short course, essentially a reading group on this one book, which is a format that seems to work well. But I am very open to feedback as we go along about how to do this work most constructively with our community over the course of next year. So now that I have been taken on full time at IKAR, which makes me very happy, this is going to be a priority in my portfolio. So I am open to your wisdom and your suggestions. One of the things that I discovered very quickly about working with this group of people is that there's a lot of wisdom already in the room. So I see my task not so much as leading as facilitating and drawing that wisdom out. Okay, so that's the background, that is the context. And now to what we're going to be doing today and what we're doing on the course. Our guidebook on this particular conscious aging course is called the December Project. It would help me if you would just drop into the chat whether you've read the book yet or not. It will help me. Thank you, Diane. I see you. You have the same edition as I do. But it will help me to know whether this is a book you have read or whether this is a book that you're discovering. You'll see it in these two formats. It's still in print in this rather interesting black and white visual. And there's also a version of it with a picture of the authors. So this is Reb Zalman Schachter Shalomi, whose first book, From Aging to Saging, we looked at in our earlier conscious aging courses. I did 2 6-week courses on his book, one in person, one on Zoom. And this is Sarah Davidson, who was, by way of being his the Boswell to his Samuel Johnson, if you want, his amanuensis and his scribe, for this second project. The December project itself is this. This is Reb Zalman himself talking. You're in the December of your years, and you know you're coming to the end of your tour of duty. What is the spiritual work of this time, and how do you prepare for the mystery? And of course, by the mystery here, he means the ultimate mystery, the mystery of dying, which is to a large extent still taboo as a subject of conversation in our society. My own view is that within the Jewish tradition, we do after death really very well indeed. There is a design to it. There are circles to it. There are expectations, both explicit and tacit, of how a community will behave towards somebody who has had somebody die. And there are these in-depth explorations of what that process is like, not least the Amen effect, written recently by Rabbi Brous, which begins with the point at which we answer Amen to somebody saying Kaddish, and how that consolidates community, builds community, walks the person through the bereavement process. Conversely, we really have not done a very good job with the lead up. And there are multiple reasons for this that a lot of the aging literature out there goes into. But it is partly, I come to this out of a conviction that we have the opportunity to do this December work before we die. And the more we are capable of accepting December work into the later part of our lives, and as I said, I'm discovering that it can start really pretty early. The more we are capable of accepting December work into our lives, the more meaningful we can make our lives on every level, the physical, the intellectual, the emotional, and of course, the spiritual. If we are prepared to square up to the idea that we are in fact going to die. I don't know how many people take the New York Times on this call. I am going to figure that maybe one or two of us read the New York Times. I'm going to suggest that you take a look at the cover of the New York Times magazine. I would bring it in, but my roommate is reading it on the kitchen table, so I can't. But it is a beautiful illustration of something that I've wanted to bring into these courses for some time, which is the way that our pets teach us about this process of letting go and of dying. So if you don't have it, I think you can get a number of them free online. It's the cover article, and the author is talking about his dog, and it's been set out as if it's a children's book. There are some very good children's books about dying, and I recommend it to you, and I'm glad to see it being lifted up in community. And of course, the questions range in various ways. There's a list of December project questions at the beginning of the book. Somebody is unmuted, I think. Yeah, Alan, it's you. With respect, I'm just going to mute you down. Because when I hear, I don't have the concentration span that I had when I was younger and a litigator, and I could march through absolutely anything regardless. I find I distract more easily as I get older. That's on me, not on you. Okay, I know what I was talking about, the list of December project questions that we looked at briefly in last session. You know, how do I feel about dying? Have I prepared for dying? What do I consider to be the work of these years? How am I doing with my body becoming more fragile? And so on and so on and so on. Big questions, important questions. So this is a forum in which to begin to touch on those questions together and to share our wisdom about them. A little bit of administrivia. I always have a slide like this at the beginning of every class. I do 3 classes. We are currently in class number 2. The class runs for 1.5 hours. I do suggest that we have writing materials by us so that we can capture the wisdom. I am old-fashioned enough to write with a pencil and a piece of paper. My pencil has an eraser on the end in case I don't like my first thoughts. But whatever way of capturing the information works for you is a good way. So a pencil, a pen, a notebook, and so on and so on. But these are sessions where it's a good idea to capture the wisdom to give us a starting point. At the end of the class, I'm going to be circulating a mailing list. I am delighted. So if you do not want to be on that mailing list, then please let me know. I am delighted to say that one of the Zoom groups that I conducted has now created a book club. And one of the things on my summer list is to circulate the details of that book club to all of the other groups as well. They're reading books on aging collectively together. So it has proved useful in terms of building community for people to share a contact email with each other. But if you don't want to be on that contact list, I need to know. So just either pop it in the chat or send me an email. That mailing list is given out under the terms of confidentiality that embrace this class. It is not for sharing. It is not for marketing use. It is not for anything except to continue the work of this class. There are recordings. It is my bad that I did not already circulate the recording of the first class. I promise that I undertake, and I used to be an attorney, so that means something. I undertake that I will circulate the recordings of last week's class and today's class as soon as they're ready, as well as copies of the slides. I just need to wait for today's class to, the recording of today's class to manifest itself in the community Zoom account, and then I'll capture the links and I will send them around. And again, please, I would ask, those recordings are only for sharing among members of the class, among the people who are on the mailing list of the class. If you did not receive an initial email last week about the beginning of the class, that means that I don't yet have your email. So please, if I can prevail upon you to do it, email me, tell me which email you want to be contacted on, and I will add you to the mailing list. And I am sorry that this is so clumsy. One of my aims for the summer is to try to tidy up this process a little bit so I don't have to keep asking you if you want to be contacted. Our modalities for this class are the group room like this and the chat. The chat in this class is really an important modality, and I'm gonna recommend that you have the chat line open throughout the class. Please feel free to drop in as we get into the work. Please feel free to drop in comments, resources. As I said, it's very much about sharing wisdom. Also in this class, I've already recommended that we note, we journal, and I will be breaking you out into small groups to discuss some focused questions about the class material. Confidentiality, this is a confidential class. This is tender and intimate work. My teacher, Parker Palmer, would call it a soul circle. And the soul only comes out when she's certain that the space is safe. Think of a deer, maybe, or a fawn. Soul work requires a safe space and the keeping of confidentiality. So whatever comes up in this class, I ask that you undertake, that you won't share it without clear permission from the person who was the source of it, and that you don't share with names. So let me just stop share and ask for a signal from you. Adrienne, I'm sorry. Oh, I missed her. I missed her. Okay, there we are. Good. Thank you. And thank you for keeping everything confidential. Hold on. Here we are. Okay. So last time, if you were here last time, we explored how to create a space in which to do this work. And we discovered that as well as physical space, I read the description of Reb Zalman's cave his basement office, as well as having a physical space in which to give ourselves the grace to do this work of eldering. We also found that there's an inside space. So our notebook, our desktop holder, our journal operate as the doorways to the space in which we do this work. But essentially, the place that we need to go to contemplate it is an inner space. In the book, he calls it our solitude, and he advises us to furnish our solitude well. Some of the key ways of approaching this work are down at the bottom of this slide. First of all, we access gratitude. Actually, that is a really good idea for any spiritual practice. Soon we will bump into who or what we need to forgive, whether in ourselves or whether other people. Ultimately, we will come out with a sense of what we have still to do, and we commit to listening in to our intuition. As we get older, very broadly put, the inner guide becomes more reliable than outward guidance. So books are useful, lectures are useful, conferences are useful, but ultimately to furnish an inner guide to which we trust and to whom we can listen. And if you've read From Aging to Saging, one of the exercises in that book is a long meditation on meeting our inner elder, our inner wisdom guide, who is our starting point for doing this work. Today, we are going to do a little bit of work around what he calls planning the exit. Just that phrase, please drop into the chat for me. How does that make us feel? Planning the exit, like your first Kishka's reaction. If I say planning the exit, it makes us feel what? Relief, discomfort, comfort. Comfort. A majority. So we're leaning towards a majority comfort in this room. Lovely. It is not the case for every room, I had to say. Yeah, lovely. Please keep the comments coming. Typically, when we turn our thoughts towards, thank you, Tally, yes, a sense of empowerment almost. Typically, when we turn our thoughts towards death and dying, there is discomfort initially. There's a strong resistance to it. There's a strong resistance in our culture. We do not want to admit that it's happening. We do have traditional models for turning towards it. One understanding of Yom Kippur is that it's a day on which you rehearse dying. Once a year, we dress in our shrouds, we deprive ourselves of the normal things that our bodies would take in or enjoy: no food, no drink, no sex, no washing, no makeup, no jewelry, and so on, so that we get the chance to look back at our lives from the perspective of having died. And then, this is the essence of teshuvah, then we get a very clear idea on what needs to change. And then we get, I think, part of the relief of the end of Yom Kippur, whether we're conscious of it or whether we're not conscious of it, is the sense that we are still alive. And as Tally just said, things are in our hands. We can make things different. Yeah. So there are models within the tradition for doing this work, but typically the first thing that it brings up is, thank you, Diane. The first thing that it brings up is discomfort. So the discomfort is okay. I want to validate the discomfort, and I want to say that part of what I conceive for this community is that we can face the discomfort together in small groups like this one and hold each other through it so that we can begin to do the work. And so today's work begins. We're going to be focusing a little bit on planning the exit. I want to say it is only one session. All right, so we're dipping our toe in this session. If there is interest, and I very much hope there is interest, this is the kind of work that can build out into a bigger course for us to do together. But for now, we're dipping our toe in the water. And for some of us, our whole foot may be in the water already, and that's good. Yeah. Okay. One way that you see in all traditions of opening up that inner space is to access gratitude first. Whatever kind of developing or healing or integrating work we're doing, starting from a point of gratitude kind of primes us for that work. It gives us access to our inner strength to engage in the work. And that's my excuse for bringing you a beautiful kavanah, a beautiful blessing from outside the tradition, from John O'Donoghue, whose work is magnificent. Hang on, what is it called? This is from a book called To Bless the Space Between Us. Gorgeous book to have on your bedside table, I would say. A really beautiful book to read before you go to sleep at night, to dip into. It takes us to a different space. So I'm going to ask us to access gratitude before we begin the work of today. And I'm going to ask, you've heard a lot of my voice so far, would anybody like to read? Please don't be shy. There's wisdom in the room. Thank you. Ellie, please. Bechavod.
Just read what's on the screen, you mean?
Please.
Yes, okay. Gratitude. I give thanks for arriving safely in a new dawn, for the gift of eyes to see the world, the gift of mind to feel at home in my life, the waves of possibility breaking on the shore of dawn, the harvest of the past that awaits my hunger, and all the furtherings this new day will bring, by John O'Donoghue.
Thank you, Ellie. Thank you. So if you were in the previous class, yes, Ellie, it's a good book. If you were in the previous class, you'll know that I asked you at the end of the class to bring along an object that to you symbolizes your death. Was anybody able to do that? I saw Ellie wince. Just let me let me know if you have. If you don't have an object, don't worry, it's not terrible. And it's partly on me for not sending you a reminder email. So there's no need to do this randomly. If we have objects, well and good. If not, we'll skip over this stage and we'll go to, I have other things up my sleeve. Don't worry. Yeah. I always feel that homework is the last thing we need in our lives. But was anybody able to bring an object? Just let us, now is the time to let us know. Don't look so disappointed. It's okay. It's really okay. It's work that we can do another time. I'm getting that is a unanimous no. It's been, yes, been quite the week for unanimity. Okay, that's fine. Then we'll skip over, we'll go on to the next stage. And I will make a mental note for myself that in future, I really must get a reminder of the homework out during the week. It's all right. We have busy and distracting lives. It's all good. But that does give us a little more time to discuss. All right, so I'm gonna break us out soon into discussion rooms for, I know that half an hour sounds frightening, but I promise once you get going, half an hour is unlikely to be enough. And what I'm going to do is to invite you to share. You might want to note down one or more aspects from this slide. This is a pulling together of the various aspects of planning the exit that appear in the December project. So I'm going to say that this slide covers a very wide piece of ground. I am going to suggest that you might only want to deal with talking about one or two of the prompts, but let me just run through what they are. And these appear, they're sprinkled throughout the book, and they also appear in the back of the book under, hold on a minute, where is it? I should have put a, here we are, under exercise 12, which is called Let Go. This is why I chose the Oseh Shalom for the beginning of the class. So if you need an overall question to dive in with, the overall question is, how will I let go? How will I let go? Okay, and these are the available aspects that you can discuss. So there's a very practical aspect to this, you know, the putting our affairs in order, the things, the list that constantly appears on the post-it on your computer, or which maybe we think about on Rosh Hashanah or secular New Year's, you know, have I done the things? You know, my roommate calls it adulting. Yeah. Have I done the things around my death? Do I have a will? Do I have a living will? A living will is a list of what would I call it? It's there's a living will and there's an ethical will. A living will here, when he says living will, he means your legacy it captured for your descendants. Who am I? What do I believe in? What do I understand my life purpose to have been? POA stands for powers of attorney. Do you have powers of attorney, by which I mean medical directives? Do those around you have a clear idea of what you would want and not want around your death? Do you want, and it can be very practical, do you want heroic measures to be taken to save your life if needed? Do you want to be fed artificially if needed? Do you want pain medication? How much pain medication do you want? The POA is all about empowering those around you to make decisions when you are no longer capable of doing them. And in a very practical sense, also an emergency list. Here's who to I have one on the screen of my computer. Here's who to contact if anything happens to me. Here's where you can find the documentation. Here's where you can find the passwords to my computer. This is my medical directive, and so on and so forth. Okay, so you can aim to exchange wisdom in this discussion group about that practical stuff. Alternatively, there is the more spiritual side. One of the things that Reb Zalman suggests is to assign gifts of gratitude. Who gets which memento? And why is it important that they get that memento? And that can be a beautiful starting point for a conversation. Who's going to get which object, and why is that important? Do you want to write letters to those you love? Or to those who you might not love in the sense that we might think. Do you want to write a final letter to a business partner? What letters might you wish to write to those you love, to those you leave behind? Another way of tackling this exercise is to rehearse your final moments. What do you, now this is deep work and you may not feel up to it today, but maybe you are. What do you want your deathbed to be like? And that links to what external measures do you want taken, but do you want a group singing around your bed? What prayers do you want read to you as you die? My teacher, whose yahrzeit was yesterday, Professor Rafel Lowy, was extremely clear about what he wanted to hear in the room when he was dying, which resulted in me and his brother standing in a hospice room singing the introduction to the Ne'ilah service in the Sephardi tradition. He had even supplied a photocopy of the words, except it was very blurry. So we were trying to decipher, moments of unintentional hilarity here. We were trying very, very hard to decipher, because it was the El Nora Alila hymn, and it looked like El Nora Smudge. But he would have been very annoyed if we smudged. So there was this moment. But we stood in the room and we sang to him because he told us that that was what he wanted. So you can be very specific. And then an exercise that we did in the Aging to Saging class, find a really good obituary and then think about, if you wrote your own obituary, what would appear in that? It's a good and kind of low-hanging fruit way to begin to approach the idea of your death. And you can even consider a living memorial service. I had a congregant at Adat Ariel who stayed on hospice for 4 years, which is something of a record. And she wanted her funeral before she died, so that she could hear what people had to say about her. So she held an enormous party for her 94th birthday, and she told people that that was what she wanted. For those of us who are fans of Grace and Frankie, there's a very similar episode in there where one of their friends who is dying of cancer has a huge, like an open funeral before you die. So those are your prompts. There's a lot there. So I suggest that as you go into group, I suggest that you agree on one, maybe two of the prompts to go deep on. And I will give us half an hour. I'm going to set up the break rooms now. Let me I'm going to take the precaution of putting the prompts in the chat line. Hold on just a minute. I see something else in the chat line. Okay, Tally, thank you. Okay, that's there. And I get that people need to leave, and that's okay. We have lives. All right. Just one more thing before I break us into the rooms, okay? The touchstones for our conversation. I know that all of you know this. I can run through them quickly. That we are welcoming to each other, that we show up for each other. That might mean that you want to put your camera on rather than off. That we speak our truth in ways that respect each other's truth, that we respond with questions, that we share by invitation, not by demand, and that we don't try to fix, save, advise, or correct each other. All of us know what this looks like, right? The fixing and the saving and the advising and correcting. Oh yeah, when I did that, I did this. It's an immediate shutdown. We promise not to do that with each other. We promise instead to approach with curiosity. What does that mean to you? What brought you to this conclusion? It sounds as though that is a profound thought for you. Can you tell me more about that? We know what to do. Okay, there's wisdom already here. Okay, so I'm going to put the aspects to consider up again. Let me break you out into rooms. Let's see, at the moment we have 7 on the call. So I'm going to give us 2, I think. Hang on, what happens if I do 3? There are 2 to 3 participants per room. This is intimate work, so I'm going to go with that. So you might be a pair, or you might be a triple. Or if one of you needs to go, then good. So this is going to set up as 3 pairs. Hold on a minute. I'm going to give us 30. Okay. Here we go. Let's see what we get. Welcome back. Welcome back. So the fact that it took the Zoom to throw you out of the breakout rooms suggests to me that those might have been fruitful conversations. Was that the case? Yeah. Okay. So I'm checking.
Yes.
Good. All right, so I think there are few enough of us in the room at this point to ask each group briefly, if you're willing, to share a little of what you spoke about. Would you be willing to do that? It's not, I don't often use the full room Zoom modality, but I think we're an intimate enough group this morning to be able to do it. So are people willing to share the contents of their conversation group by group? Is that okay? Is there anybody who disagrees? This is important. No? Okay. So I'm just randomly going to ask Ellie to share who your partner was and what you discussed, please.
You said Ellis, right?
I actually said Ellie, but if you really don't want to be the first, I wonder if Ellis will be chivalrous and step into the breach.
Go on, Ellis.
Okay.
Are you willing?
I'm willing if you don't want to. I don't need to.
We could both do it. How's
Okay.
that? Well, we were with Tally also. We had 3 of us. And I'll just start with what I shared, because I've been very emotional about a friend ended up in not in a really horrible nursing home recently. I met her when I got out of the hospital at the end of 2020, and I was in the board and care with her. She got me through it. And I went to visit her, and her son has pretty much dumped her there. So talk about making sure that your loved ones that you make sure you know what you want. And in every possible situation, if I end up in the hospital with a UTI and I'm confused, and then I blah, 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 which is what happened to her.
Yeah.
Her son says he needs a break from taking care of her. And so this is where she's going to be. So I've been feeling very sad, grieving about that, and I'll go visit her. And I have all of my stuff in order. I have notebooks, I have everything in order. I think, we were also getting to know each other, but Tally shared about being in the singing group, Threshold Choir.
Oh, she's a Threshold Choir member.
Yes, and they sing to people who are facing the end of their life, which I thought was very, very moving, very powerful.
It's beautiful work. So
I'd never heard of it before.
No, I hadn't either.
And then, Rabbi, when you mentioned being asked to sing at someone's deathbed, and then this is what she does as a volunteer, sometimes in person, sometimes on Zoom, if I remember correctly.
yeah.
It was just eye-opening. I didn't know this existed.
Yeah. And you can ask for it. So this is a beautiful connection. My sister, who you heard at the beginning, runs a network of threshold choirs in England. There are about 15 groups now all over England, and she trains them. Something to ask for is music at our bedsides, I think, except I will share, ironically, my mother, who did end up enjoying it, but whose initial reaction was, I just want to be left alone. But she changed her mind. Thank you for sharing that. And you're right, both of you in the LE group. You're right that part of this is to begin to, for people to begin to get to know each other. Because I think that we can't do this kind of work unless we have a sense of each other. You can't just, okay, here's your punch list. Yeah, so I'm glad that connections are developing, and it will be my task over the course of next year to be thinking about how do we consolidate this community? What do we do? What kind of events do we run together? How do we continue to come together in meaningful ways around this material? So thank you.
Ellis, do you want to add anything?
I want to add something that isn't related to death, but it's related to this conversation. Some decades ago, I went to hear a speech by Reb Zalman Schachter, Shlomi, and the subject of his speech was connecting, meaning connecting with God.
Mm.
At the end, he took questions, and I asked Reb Zalman, how do you connect if you're not at all sure there's anything to connect with? And he said, you sing in Nigun.
Ah.
And he, of course, didn't know my closest connection to Judaism is through music. So it was the right answer to give me.
How lovely. Thank you. Thank you. And yeah, it brings us up against the limits of language, right? Sometimes it can be really hard to find words for this stuff. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I'm also a fan of Nikunin. Thank you both. Another group. There are two groups of two. Who's it going to be? Karen, thank you for being brave.
So Susan, sorry, I'm looking at the name on at the bottom. Sheila and I are both psychologists, which was very interesting that we would come together, and we have, I think, have had long careers doing that kind of work. Although I'm not actively working, Sheila's kind of working. But I talk mostly about not having any kind of real plan as to where I go from here, and feeling pretty lost about it. I have two kids, don't live here in Los Angeles. And so when I think about what's the next step and how to plan, it's like I just don't even have a clue as to what I want to do. And I live in a house alone, and I just had tons and tons of damage from the rain. So I had a contractor here for 3 weeks, and I was asking myself, how long do I want to do this? How long do I want to just keep up this, kind of maintenance work? And then Sheila and I talked about, well, what's the alternative? And where would we go? And neither one of us had good alternatives at all or liked them. In terms of planning, I haven't done a lot of planning, although when my husband was dying, we went to Mount Sinai and picked out plots. So that was some planning. I have like 10 relatives that are buried there, including my mother and father. And so it just felt to me like where I wanted to be. So in terms of that, yeah, some planning, but other than that, not too much else, except for trust and will and all that. I have that.
It's so interesting, isn't it? It reinforces. I did not know, by the way, that I was putting two psychologists together. And I'm very grateful to the computer for doing that for me. It sounds as though it was meaningful, but I think it underscores, doesn't it, the way that we do post-death so much better than we do pre-death, if I can put it that way. One thing that is beginning to take a hold is the idea of communal living. It's widely accepted, I think, that we do a terrible, terrible, terrible job of living living as elders, where we we struggle on in our own homes for as long as we can, and then you end up somewhere completely different, surrounded by people who you don't know. There is a lot of exploring going on and it's happening on a very small scale. It's hard to track, but people living with friends, people resolving midlife. This is my own situation, to live long term with a friend or more. And it requires an adjustment, because you're sizing, you have to step away from the idea that a grown-up human being has a piece of property. And that's quite a challenging idea to step away from. Yeah. But we're finding that it's working out decently well. We're the right level of, people think we're actual partners, and we're not, but it's the right level of comfort and support for each other. And it seems to me that in terms of resources, in terms of environmental footprint, in terms of companionship, and trust, and it's they do it in the younger part of the community. They bring all these young kids together, and they call them a Moishe house. But for some reason, it's not taking hold in the older generation of the community. And it seems to me that the Moishe house model is an excellent model for us. So let me just plop that one out there. Yes, Ellis, correct. Yes, yes, yes. I think there's real mileage there. It's often crossed my mind that I should call Moishe House and kickstart the conversation. And maybe this is the year that I will. Thank you. Anything else that?
Well, Sheila didn't really get a chance to speak, and we were in the group together, so.
No, I got a chance. I have a very different, I mean, I've been thinking about this a lot. In fact, I showed Karen this book that we have. It's called Shit You'll Need to Know When I'm Gone.
Whoa.
It's a good one.
And because I've thought about this a lot, and my kids are trying to push us to sign up for some senior place, which I'm not going to do. But I have thought about it a lot.
Yeah, I think I'm just noting down the title of the book.
Yeah, it's a good one.
That's an excellent title. There's
You want to share with us about what you've thought about a lot?
Oh, I've thought, well, I mean, I told Karen, I'll tell this quickly, but I've had an incredible life. I mean, I look back on my life and think about the things I've done. And I thought at one point, well, I've done so much that if I died, it would be fine. I don't quite feel that way now, as I'm getting a little more older, but my cousin had a friend, that Walter Briel, who was part of the Kemp-Briel Act. So you didn't have to take an oath to the United States. He helped pass that. He was an analyst in the city. And when he died, he sat up at the end and said, I did the best I could. And that's, if I were I'm going to be cremated, but if I were going to be buried, that's what I would want on my tombstone. So I've thought about it in those ways, and the opportunities I've had and the things I've done.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. We do have, as Tally said at the beginning, it is in our hands, at least up to a point. We're just not being, socially encouraged towards it. And Karen, as you said, that feeling of being lost, that's something I'm seeing a lot. There is no roadmap.
No.
But it's beginning to bubble up. It's beginning to bubble up, and it helps to be able to, I think, to create the spaces to share the wisdom for it.
Yeah.
Diane and Susan.
Yes, Susan is walking.
I know that.
So
part of her practice.
can you talk now, Susan?
Yes, I can.
Okay,
I just got in.
why don't you start and then I'll have my
Okay.
2 minutes later.
Diane and I have met each other before at the Boomers, which is the over 60 Friday happy hour online. So I knew Diane, so we didn't have to do too much getting to know each other. We chose to focus on the letters, and we also got into a discussion about sons. Both her son and mine had married non-Jewish women, but what's happened as far as raising the children, which is one of the things I feel somewhat strongly about, and it's a very difficult one in my situation. Diane's lucky enough that her daughter-in-law has been raising the children Jewish because she didn't have a faith base. And so, that side for Diane is taken care of, but we both felt the letters were an important one. It's something we'd not thought of. And passing the tradition or not passing the tradition. So that's, I'll let Diane take over from there.
In 1 minute, somebody calls me a holy nudnik in that I'm always the one to bring up yes, but or something. So yeah, Susan and I had a great talk, and we realized how children and grandchildren affect how we look at our life, not death, but our life.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that my friends without children, this is a whole different thing. They actually have to find people to give their stuff to. But and what does that mean? We're still going to die whether we have kids or not. I mean, so what is it that makes it different for people? I find that they are in an existentially challenging space. So my final comment is the nuts and bolts to-do list is incredibly important. Especially for those people around us. I don't want my son to come into my house and have to throw out my artwork. But it's still only a piece of it. What you said, Rabbi Silver, is that we're really good at after death. We're not so good at pre-death. But you left out one of the phases of this process, which is death. Whether we have the people singing around us or we've given away, I've written a letter to my daughter-in-law, it's still an existential spiritual issue. And sometimes our reluctance to deal with that prevents us from getting the manila folder with our passwords to people. And sometimes when we take care of that, we said, okay, now I'm ready. And sometimes we're not.
Yeah.
And the only other thing is I took care of my cousin, my twin cousin when she was for ALS. And she said, I got this. Every day isn't too bad, and I'll live for the day and I'll live for the moment. And 4 months before she died, she called up in tears, barely able to speak, and said, it's not working anymore.
Wow.
Today isn't okay.
Right.
As long as it was, so who needs legs? I don't even need arms. People can feed me. But when it finally she realized, oh, this isn't okay now. Come see me. So I did. So I was very much aware that preparation is absolutely necessary, but it doesn't fix, we're still not in control.
Agree.
So that's my holy nudnik comment.
Thank you. No, it's a good nudnik comment, Diane. It's a good nudnik comment. And it's work that I want to do and that I want to encourage and that I want to see done. The reason, and you're right, there's a gap because this is a 3-session course on Zoom and we're dipping in toe. My concern is that when we do this work, and I want it to be a when and not an if, the container for the work is safe.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that has to be built first. But you're right, it's a really, I still haven't quite let go of the idea of being able to do a retreat, an end of life retreat. And when you have it intensively like that, when people are together, when they've been eating together and building community together, then I think you can begin to explore, you know, round about Saturday afternoon, if it's a weekend retreat, it's probably time to start talking square on about death. And it needs talking about. I completely agree. But we have to be, we have to be careful of containers. But I sense an urgency for talking about it. And I share that urgency. I share that urgency. I do. I do. It's overdue. It's a good time for me to pop into the chat that this Thursday there is a virtual conference on aging. That we will publicize in Tuesday's newsletter, but I want you guys to know about it in advance. It's free. It starts for us at about 9 o'clock in the morning. You just sign up to register. Hang on the website. I had it. Hold on, I can show you the page so that you can see what is going on here. And dang. Here we are. Okay, bear with me. It vanished and I didn't want it to. So this is as you see, this is what they do to capture the potential for Jewish and civic engagement during the period from midlife careers into retirement. Rabbi Brous is going to be on a panel, one of the panels at this conference. I think she's talking at 10. But you can sign up. The national convening is beginning to get traction. And it brings together really a very wide range of people across the Jewish community. If you know of Rabbi Laura Geller, who wrote with her late husband, Getting Good at Growing Older, she is one of the key people in this movement. And it's a really, really good set of resources. So the list of speakers and topics, let me just open that. So you can see, and there are workshops, there are case presentations. Remember, these are East Coast times. We're 3 hours earlier. And some interesting stuff going on and interesting connections being made. Certainly the age-friendly Upper West Side, you know, there's a little bit of kind of communal livingness going on in there. If you're interested in the communal living piece, by the way, you should check out the Moshav Berkeley, which is a quite well evolved project for people to live together, Moshav style. So that might be, that's a nice gathering of resources that happens to be chronologically convenient for us. It's happening on June the 6th. So this week, Diane, I see you have to go. I get it, because we're already at 10:35. Oh God. Okay, I will send around, I promise I will send around, but let me just share the work for next time, which is, now that, having looked at what we looked at today, how does it change how you think about tomorrow? That's my departing question for you. And I invite you to begin a list of what you still wish to do, because that's going to be our next and final session. It's the end of Yom Kippur moment. Having contemplated death and everything that is involved in that, what do I need to do now? How does that change where I am right in this very moment? And that will be the work of next week's session. Having contemplated dying, how do I want to live? Okay, so we will be doing some digging on that next week. If you can get to the aging conference or some of it, it's all free, so you can drop into it and drop out of it as you please. But for myself, I need to let you go. I don't want people to just drop off the twig at this point, and we are getting late. Karen, was that a question?
No, I thought you were saying goodbye, so
I am, but in that very Jewish way. That very Jewish way. Let me offer us a closing blessing, and then we can go, and we don't need the screen for that. So just take a moment, take a breath. That was big work. In our eldering and in our Decembering, may we be blessed and safe. May we be luminous and loved. May we be joyous and whole. Amen. Thank you for coming.
Bye.
Thank you for coming. And Susan, yes, I can.
Okay, thank you. I have to finish so I can send out my email for the spiritual kneading, which is on Tuesday evening.
Great.
My question is, I guess it's basically a halachic one. Number one of the quick challah recipes I have does not contain yeast. It's made with yogurt, self-rising flour, and water. Does that count as challah to make a blessing or not? If you have to research it and get back, I do understand.
I think the essence of challah is not that it's yeast. I think the essence of challah is that it's bread.
It's definitely bread.
Okay, hang on a sec.
And I have the same question about bread made with beer in it. Beer instead of yeast. The beer becomes a rising agent.
Any bread is fine. Hold on a minute. What bread can substitute for challah? Does Shabbat bread have to be challah? A no yeast challah recipe. Yeah, hang on a sec. What makes a challah a challah? Hold on a minute. Word love. Challah is the portion of dough that is separated, variations.
Right, but it's not big enough to separate. It's like making a small loaf.
Yeah. That makes sense. A truly kosher challah. That stopped being helpful. Hold on. I'm researching on one foot.
No, that's fine. I'm sorry to throw this at you.
No, it's fine. My hunch is yes.
But it counts.
Yes. There isn't any definitive challah recipe. Any bread that includes 5-grain flour.
It does, because self-rising is a wheat flour.
Okay. Okay, gets the hamotzi blessing and counts as challah. All right, subject to quantity. 1/8 of the total ingredients should be flour from one of the 5 grains.
It's more than 1/8 of the ingredient, yes.
And there has to be at least a certain amount. The bread has to be a serious component of the meal, and you need to eat at least the volume of 4 eggs worth, which is not difficult to do with fresh bread.
Right.
Well, this is about cornbread. Okay, wheat. So before you make cornbread for Shabbat dinner, make sure wheat flour is at least 1/8 of the total ingredients, and you plan on eating lots of it with your meal. Okay.
Okay.
And be careful about throwing lots of other stuff into your bread, thereby turning it into a muffin or cake, but still trying to pass it off as challah. So I think on both of those you're good. The inyan is not the yeast. The inyan
It's
is
the flour or the grain, I should say,
Yeah.
one of the 5 species.
exactly.
Okay.
And if that's more than 1/8 of the recipe, subject to the quantity of it that you're making, because you know those rules.
Yes.
You know,
And it's not big enough to take challah from. I
right.
can tell you that right off.
Okay, but I also I'm also a big fan of elective challah taking. I rule very, very,
Oh,
very
do you?
on this. I do. So as far as I'm concerned, okay, the quantity is halachically not enough to take challah, but for the sake of education, we're going to learn how to take challah. So we'll take it and we'll wrap it in the foil, or we'll give it to the dog to eat, or we'll do whatever it is.
Yeah, I do the foil and burn in the oven routine.
Exactly. And then we'll say la frish challah minaisa, just so that we know what to do if we're ever making enough.
Yes.
So but I'm very liberal on this, Susan. I'd always rather people learn something than didn't, but I'm
Right.
really bend that rule until it creaks. Yeah, it sounds great.
All right. Thank you. If you can give us a promotion Tuesday morning, that would be good.
That would be great. Don't feel afraid to drop it in the chat. I will try to remember, but you know me and my memory, or reach out to another minion person and ask them to drop it in the chat.
Okay, I can do that.
Yeah, and then just because my head is like a sieve, and it's a big week, and I don't want to miss promoting it.
Yes.
Yeah? It sounds.
So it's a big week besides tonight.
I know. Oh God, yeah.
I was afraid to contact Andrea till tomorrow morning.
No, I teach today. I teach tomorrow. I teach.
Oh, that's right. You have a Nachman. And unfortunately, last week was the only week I didn't have Hebrew and could come to Rabbi Nachman because we didn't.
That's okay.
AJU takes off government holidays.
I understand, but there are recordings.
And they're on YouTube, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, my dear.
Thank you for the clarification.
You're
Very
welcome.
That gives me a good teaching point on the subject.
You're very, very welcome. A delight for me.
Thank you. Have a good week, and I hope you can stay sane.
Oh, I will. I'm energized by teaching. It's just all a bit bonkers.
No, I love teaching too, so I understand.
No.
All right. Thank you. Have a good
day. I'll see you soon.
Bye.